Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Dominic Story, and I'm a tech leader and master inventor in the IBM Cloud Integration team. And this presentation is going to be on the data mapping and transformation options we currently have in the App Connect product, and we're constantly adding these as we go, both on updates to our private and public cloud offerings. So I'll explain a bit more about what they are as we go through. Okay, so what is integration? IBM App Connect. Right, so I really like this slide. It's very simple and it explains in very simple terms what integration is to everybody. It's simply routing data from one place to another, a pipe of data between 2 points, but having the capability to convert this data to understandable, valuable information using modeling is the key, as this can then be used to map and transform further the information and route to endpoints to deliver the data in a way that that endpoint will understand and be able to use it efficiently. Translating raw data inputs to usable, valuable business information and transactions available to any part of the business is very, very valuable. So it's, it's a mostly hidden pipe, but it's there in every business in every industry, able to routing all this information around. So it's a very, very important topic. And if it's hidden, it means it's doing its job well. Right. So what is the IBM's integration product in this space? It is App Connect. So we've had 20 years of history. So we first started this product back in 1999, just before the millennium bug hit. And down in the bottom left, there is a picture of me from 1999. I'd only been in IBM a couple of years. So, I haven't changed much, have I? But the only impact for us in Hersley for the millennium bug was all of our coffee machines said date not set on them. So we all were doing midnight shifts, or a lot of us were doing midnight shifts over the millennium. And then we all went to get a coffee when nothing really too disastrous happened. And we couldn't get coffee. All the coffee machines were just flashing date not set, and we couldn't get coffee. So that's my biggest memory of MQ Series Integrator back in 1999, back in that early development stage there. But what we were originally was a very small team of just 30 or so, starting a transformation and routing engine for MQ applications, as MQ have been very, very successful on all of the platforms that MQ is available on. Customers told us that they wanted this, and so that's why we built it. So the WebSphere MQ integrator that you can see here, this was the very first UI that we had. It didn't have many connectors or nodes. It was very MQ based with MQ outputs and MQ inputs, and allowed you to do relatively basic manipulation of the message models and routing. It was based mostly on SQL, so it had a database backing it, and most of the handling of the message models and the messages was all via SQL. So everything was database and SQL tables. So then what we did was we moved on to the WebSphere message broker and the business integration message broker. This is the next sort of image here on in the middle. And what we did there was, this was around 2004, 2005, everything moved on from SQL and databases to XML and web services. So this was the start of the XML web service era, where message models became much, much more important. Everything wasn't just held in a database anymore. You couldn't access everything with eSQL or SQL like you could previously. And so here we developed a way of parsing and writing messages. So we developed the MRM, the Message Model Repository Manager, or the Modeling Repository Manager. And we used that to generate a canonical generic model from which we could do parsing and writing. So we all wanted the performance to be very, very good. So this all had an eye for performance and scalability. And what we'd used was, in the back end, we used a very compact C messaging model to hold all of the messages as they went through the system. But you could manipulate that message model with eSQL, with Java, and with lots of other bindings that we could tack on the side, and they all directly altered this C structure. So it was very, very fast, holding the model in just one format, canonical. So anything coming in from any place would be put into this model. It would have a local and a global environment. So as a single message went through, that would have its own local environment, but then it would also have access to a global environment, which had parts that you could store away for all of the messages going through. So it gave you a very rich transformation and modeling environment from which you could map and model your messages. Right, so at this same time as well, another thing we did was we started to add more and more connectors and nodes. So the ability to connect to lots and lots of different types of database, the ability to read and write files on the file system. So if you're running on Linux or AIX or HP or ZOS, you could read and write files there. HTTP endpoints also came in. So this was something that customers wanted. They wanted the ability to be able to call out to other HTTP and HTTPS endpoints in a generic way. And so by this time, the team was getting very large and adding in more and more function into that base engine. Transformations, Java compute nodes, .NET nodes, and we even ran internal competitions for people to come up with ideas for nodes, and we implemented the best. So there were internal competitions where people got a little bonus for coming up with ideas for nodes. And so that was, that was all fun, exciting time, and a bit of a history lesson there. But that effectively brings us up to more recent times, and of course at the moment REST has taken over. And so we're no longer focused so much on the web services and XML, but moved to the REST space due to simplicity, I think, mostly because if you use JSON and YAML for modeling and there's no strict schemas, it's much easier to be able to process the messages, fire things up quite quickly. And we don't always need very, very strict modeling schemas. We can put in checking for models. And so we've adapted to this, and that's what we've done with our new App Connect product here. But we've still got, of course, all the capability that we've got here, as well as this new App Connect view. Okay, so what do we have here? So our App Connect product has morphed again. So we've gone from eSQL to XML to REST, and now we're following again and keeping all of that ability, but we're now morphed again into this new shape. So what do we have here? So we now cater for the sort of citizen user or the digital team user. So this is a user who maybe doesn't have very deep integration skills, who maybe understands an endpoint like a service, so understands they want to connect, say a service now, or an API to a Slack or another backend, completely generic backend system, but they don't really know the details of the systems they're connecting to. So the user we call there is the citizen or ad hoc user, but specialist integrators can still use this too. So there's nothing stopping somebody who's maybe understands ACE and integration bus of old from using this. This is still, it's a tool that you can very quickly fire integrations up and test out maybe an integration that you might have in your head. So it's very strongly typed. It uses set models. Each one of the connectors that connects to the endpoints like the Salesforce, the ServiceNow, they are smart connectors, so they can connect to, say, Salesforce and pull back all of the models that you've created. So that's different from the way that, say, the Toolkit worked of old. It was very, very generic, and you had to set up a lot or grab a lot of models. But that's where we've sort of put the effort in here in the designer. It's in creating those individual connectors and then provide simple routing between those connectors. And then here we've got the toolkit. So this is loosely typed. So this is much more that generic C structured model again, that you can populate, and then once it's inside the flow, you can effectively do what you want with it. You can change it around, merge it to other models, and it's highly configurable within those nodes. And you can do much more complex style of routing. And so again, this is much more for expert users, for specialist integrators. But we have this ability to be able to communicate between the two worlds. So we have this hybrid callable flow capability. So the ability to, say, take information dynamically from Salesforce using the designer, either running on a private cloud or a public cloud, and then being able to call out to your ACE, again, running locally in your system or running in a cloud somewhere as well, and then to be able to call back. So we really have the power of all the worlds now. You know, you can, there's no right or wrong answer. Should I use Toolkit? Should I use Designer? I mean, basically it boils down to the skills available and the functionality required. You know, if you want something that's going to be very, very fast, and you want it to be able to change and really go down into the detail, you would use the toolkit. But if you've got something that maybe doesn't need to be quite so fast, but you could be something that you're setting up, say, a POC for a digital team, for example, or you want to give a digital team access to something in your back end, then you can create a basic API or an API which then the users could use to call through to your ACE flows. So you know, you don't need to be in either of these camps. You get them both. You know, you don't need to just use the toolkit, and you don't need to just use the designer. You can use whichever you want, whenever you want. Okay, so I'll move on. So I'll now go through an overview of the designer, and then I'll touch on the toolkit as well. Okay, so here's the App Connect designer. So the App Connect designer comes in several forms. So you can either use it on-premise on your own servers. So this is installed in our Cloud Pak for integration. So our Cloud Pak for integration is something that runs on Red Hat OpenShift. And so effectively you can install that anywhere. If you've got an AWS cloud or an Azure cloud or a Google cloud, you can install Red Hat OpenShift on there and then install our operator, which is what you can see in the background here. And this then gives you access to our integration servers, our dashboard for using those integration servers, and our designer authoring experience as well. So this basically gives you the ability to run your bar files and to manage your bar files, as well as create those more sort of designer designer integrations. So you've got your designer integrations and your toolkit integrations all being able to be run within this Cloud Pak for integration. Right, okay, so that's that. When you're running within the designer Cloud Pak for integration, one of the other things you get is the Grafana and Kibana. So this is the way that you can log and graph messages going through. So everything within the Cloud Pak for integration uses the Kibana and Grafana as its logging and graphical mechanism. So once you're in the Red Hat world, you can start to use all of the tools that are available to you within that Red Hat world. So you can see down here. So I've run a database integration server, and you can see I fired a couple of messages through. You can see the timing on that. There's quite a few integration servers here running, again with several invocations. And then you can see the log messages of the integration server going through here. So it's one place where no matter how many integration servers you've got running within your environment, you can sort of bring all of those logs and all of that graphing together into one place, and then see that all running. Okay. Right. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide. Right. So within the designer, we have a list of lots and lots of these pre-built connectors, and they all have a lot of common functionality. So the flow capability we provide are things like batching, retry mechanisms to handle outages from third-party systems. Connectors can listen to and trigger on events or fire on timers. And all the connectors are available with App Connect Designer. You don't need to pay for individual connectors or anything like that. Everything you see here, you get once you've got the App Connect design of the CP4I product. You get the whole lot. It's all there. So the ability for all of these to then be able to interact, bringing together all of these inputs into this common flow model is very, very powerful. And if there's a connector that we don't have that you'd want, you just send an email to this address, and we'll see if we can do it for you. We're constantly creating new ones of these. So here's the list as a snapshot that I took about 2 or 3 months ago now. So this list will already be out of date. We're adding connectors all the time at a large rate. They're just constantly being developed, and we're constantly producing them and enhancing other connectors as well. So if there's something, for example, in the DB2 connector that's needed, we can enhance that and produce that. Of course, we've got full service on all of this. It's all IBM owned. All the connectors source code is our source code. We've not got third parties or anything. This is this is what we're writing. So any issues you have with any of these, this service is fully available. And also, if one of these connectors does not exist, you can create your own. So this is how you can extend the reach even further. So here what we have is the Open API or REST generic connector, and also the SOAP WSDL connector. So what you can do is you can import an API or either a REST model, like a Swagger model, or a WSDL model, and then you can create your own connector. So here you can see there's a list here of address lookup web service, which you can then use within your flow. So you're not limited just to the palette that we provide. You can also then bring your own WSDLs, your own Swaggers, import them, onboard them, and they then show up as a fully fledged connector that can then be used. So this makes it very powerful. So all of those WSDLs that you've created in your organization for all your backend systems, if you want to do just a simple lookup, you can just import that WSDL from your backend system, create the connector, and away you go. You can then use that inside one of your designer flows. Right. So what else can we do? So I touched on this previously. Flows can be started by triggers. So, there's a quote there from Gartner: customers expect organizations to respond to events as they occur in real time. So across your entire organization, sales orders are being created, leads are being created, complaints are happening. And so you want to be able to react to these in real time. So you want to be able to take those as input, maybe do some processing with them, decide maybe if something requires a higher level of service or not, and then to figure out what you want to do next with that message. So this is all can be done all in real time. There's no batching needed. Right, so that enables teams to react quickly. Okay, so I've got a Salesforce to Cloud demo I can show you now. So this is a simple flow. So acting on an event from Salesforce. So this is going to briefly build up a flow. So here you can see a standard dashboard where we have an integration server, and we have several at the moment stopped integration flows that are not running. And we've also got an integration server there, so that's just basically a bar file running in an integration server. So all of that, all visible, all in the same UI. Right, so this is now creating a brand new flow, all web-based, so all using a web UI. And there's a big list of applications there, so that's the list of applications that I showed you earlier, but these are the ones that allow you to start a flow. So these are the ones that allow you to react to an event or a trigger. You can see here we've selected the Salesforce input, and using that Salesforce, we can see there's the variety of things. So if a new case is created or a new account is created, we can start the flow from that. We can also pull down dynamically, so we can query that endpoint, that Salesforce endpoint that you're connected to, so your Salesforce third party, and we can pull down all the other custom triggers and actions that they have that you've defined, which is just to your environment as well. But in this case, we're going to do an updated lead. So somebody somewhere is going to update a lead. Then what we want to do is we want to act on that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, well, that's there showing the toolbox. That's some of the things that are available at that point. You can do if logic, you can log out, lots of different things. But what we want to do is we want to put something into a database. So at this point, we're going to use, again, you can have several accounts in your cloud. So here we're going to use account 1. So you set up the accounts in a separate part of the UI. So you could have your production environment there, or your pre-prod and test, for example. And here you can see you can create documents, retrieve documents, update documents. So we've got an updated lead coming in, and now what we're going to do is we're going to update or create a document within inside this cloud database. So we've got a database there already called leads. We want to search that database, that leads table, and we want to find the lead that's come in and update that. So what we'll do is we'll try and find, I think it's the name we use here, or was it the lead ID? Right, so we get the lead ID that comes in from Salesforce, and when that matches, we will update that document. So this is now the part where we're now going to update the document in that cloud database with some information that's come in from that lead ID. So that lead ID has been matched. We've pulled the cloud document down, and what we're going to do is we're going to update or create the first name, last name, email, and the company. So there we are building up that document data, which is the mapping that we've just edited, which we've dynamically pulled down from Cloudant. So we've dynamically pulled that down. So again, this is all showing you right where you need it, the information. Here you can see the first and the last name being assigned. So what we're saying here is, as the message flows through the flow here, it adds, every single one of these connectors adds more and more information. So as the trigger has come through, as the action has come through from Salesforce, that already has an object assigned to it. So this is an object that's being created, which has first name, last name, email, company, and a lot more. And so that's already there. And what we've done here is we've said, right, for our Cloudant table, we want to assign the first name from that Salesforce to the first name within the Cloudant. So this is a relatively straightforward flow. Very, very simple. Match this to this, and we've now started that flow. So that flow is now running. This is using the cloud version. So you could also run this on your local, on your on-prem, using the Red Hat if you wanted to. So using the CP4i. But this example here is running it in the cloud. So this is our managed SaaS service version of the product. So here, if we go to leads, you can see there's no documents there in the leads. Now we're switching to Salesforce, and we're going to create or update a lead. So we're going to change Joe Cringe, I think it is. So we'll update him. So go through to there, do an edit, and edit his email address, and then save. So once we save that will cause an event to trigger. So if we go back, so Salesforce itself will then send that event down to our flow. You can see a little green tick there to see that the run was successful. So we have actually run that flow. And then if we refresh our database, we should see a new lead. There we go. And so that new lead has been placed into that database. And you can see there we've got Joe Cringe with the email address, and that's the exact model that we put in there. Okay, so that's what I had there. Right. So I'll take questions at the end, I think, because it'll probably be easier to do that. So I'll just try and get through all my slides first, just because of this new format, and then we can take messages, take questions at the end. Okay, so this is how you would also build an API. So what you saw there was using the smart connectors that are available within inside the product to be able to connect third-party web applications or applications together. But flows can also be triggered by API calls. And so you can very easily create an API call with a payload. So for example, a mobile application could be created for your company that could, very, very easily call through to one of these App Connect designer flows, and then it could call through in the back end of this flow to, say, an ACE integration, for example. And so you could have the ability to call a back-end system of record, but from a sort of sanitized API that you put at the front in Designer. So rather than giving access to, say, development teams or digital teams access directly to your system of record, you would give them access to this well-defined API that you could then control, which can then access your system of record. I mean, there's several banks I know have given front-end teams access to their production databases with, let's say, not very good consequences. It's very easy for, say, a digital team or a front-end team to create an app that can very quickly corrupt back-end data. And then when that data tries to get processed by, say, traditional XML schemas or whatever, all of a sudden it can cause a lot of problems. So I know of several companies that are using this approach now to be able to make sure that any API call that comes in is handled in a way that it's checked before it then gets sent on to the system of record, because everybody wants to move so much faster these days, and saying you're going to take 2 or 3 months to create an integration is just doesn't work anymore. You want to be able to fire something up like this with an API accessible to one of your digital teams very, very quickly, within a matter of days. And then if it doesn't fly, you can just tear it down. So anyway, so that was a bit of a bit of a deviation, but you can see here with the building of the API, what you can do is you can do things like have a post, a get, a put. So you can very easily have flows to handle all these different variants, and you can respond to the data coming through and create a flow that can handle posting of new data, retrieval of data, all in something that's externally available the second you hit start. And if you ever want to stop it, you just hit stop and it stops. And again, this can all be created and all can run on-prem as well in your CP4I environment. So that gives you the ability to expose well-formed REST APIs, and we have all the ability to share these REST APIs as well using Swagger documents that we generate on the fly. Okay, so I can show you a brief demo of that, of actually creating an API. Okay, so what this is going to do is this flow is going to get a list of ATMs using a database query against an ATM table. So an ID comes in, and it's used in the database query to retrieve the location of that ATM. So this could be a mobile app that wants to be able to get a list of ATMs for your bank for a certain location. And so this will be a running API within a couple of minutes. So here we're creating the get ATM. So this is going to create the model. So the first thing we do is we want to create the model so that we can retrieve the customers from the from our backend database. Right, so here we go. So here we have the model, which is ATM. So we're going to have the ATM ID that's going to come in for this, and a town. So these are all properties that can come in on the gets or the posts. And then when we latitude and longitude as well. And here we'll be using JSON Arter to pull out and create fields to be able to put the message together. So JSON Arter is something that I will go on to and mention in a few minutes. You have a primary ID, so there always has to be a primary ID in there. So that, for this, we're going to use the ATM ID. And select that. So this is our model, our ATM model. So we're going to take an ID and we're going to return, or a town, and we're going to return the location and latitude and longitude. Right, so retrieve the ATM by ID. Okay. So I'll fast forward a bit here just to make sure. So time's moving on. Right, so this, by selecting the retrieve ATM by ID there, this will be the endpoint that you will hit, /ATM/ID. And this then creates the base API flow. So we get the request in, which will contain the ID as a query parameter, as its input parameter. And then we will be able to use that within our flow to then create a response, which is not yet configured, but we will configure that and we will return it now. So what's the first thing we want to do? So we want to access our database where we've got all of our ATMs. And then we want to be able to pull out, this is a database running on Kubernetes somewhere. And we want to be able to pull out the ATM table. So here you can see we've selected the ATMs. So from DB2, it has the ability to create records, retrieve records, or update records. And again, that's all in the database. That's all what we've retrieved. So we can see that action is available. So what we're going to do here is we're going to retrieve the ATM record. What we're going to do, we're going to add a condition. So the ID needs to equal the ID that's passed in. So you can see there that the ATM ID has come in through the request object because we've defined that as our model. So that comes in. And then once we've pulled that out, we then continue down the flow. And then this is where we're now creating the response body. So we've made the query, we've pulled out the ATM ID, and you can see here the model from the record. You can see what the record looks like. So we have an ID, a town, and a street, all available. And so we can then fill in our response body that we defined in the model at the start with all that information. So we can pull those things in. We're using JSON Arter here. So just to pull in the IDs, because this could be an array. So we may need to select an initial part of the array. So we handle array objects coming back. And here we're populating all of those pieces of information into there. Right, so that's that done. Now we're going to get an ATM via a town instead. So very, very similar. So we're creating another flow, and we're going to pull in again the town. But this time the slight difference here is rather than it being an individual one, we have an array. So we can cope with pulling in multiple ATMs from that town rather than just a single ATM ID that we're going to reply with. Now we're going to build up an array. And we can say we want out of every single one of those arrays, we want to pull out the ID, the town, and the street, and so on. So we now have two APIs that have been created within just a few minutes to be able to get an individual ID or to be able to get all the ones that are in a town. Once you've defined your endpoints, your API endpoints, you can then switch to your manage tab. So here is where you would define your security for accessing that API, any limits. So you might only want, say, 10 calls a second so that you don't overload a backend system. That can all be done here. You can export the API definition so that other people can use it. Here we're creating an API key. So this then means that anybody who calls through to this will need to provide that API key. And as part of the experience, we also have this built-in way of testing the endpoint. So you can see here that we have examples, lots of different language examples, curl, go, and so on, with all these drop downs up here. But here you can see an example curl request and an example response with just randomly filled in data. So this uses the API Connect technology as well. So we're also sharing technology between different parts of the Cloud Paks here. So this is not, we're using the best of breed technology that we have in all the various locations. So there you can see there's a little bit of example of Go code if your application was using Go to be able to call this endpoint. And then you can do if you go into the try it at the top right there, you can type in the town, call the operation, and this will live call the operation. And you can see here we've got a 200 back. It's called that endpoint live, and it's taken the query parameter of Glasgow as the town. And then further on down, you can see we've got an array back of all of the ATMs in Glasgow. So that's showing building up sort of a basic API all running. Now you can send in that single ID, and we can get that single ID out as well. So again, showing the power of being able to very, very quickly build the thing up, test it at various stages, and then check that the whole thing works before you go into pre-production or production. Okay. Right, so that was creating an API. Right, so now part of that we touched on a little bit of JSON Arter. So this is where we get into a bit more of the parsing, mapping, and transforming within inside the designer product. Right, okay. So one of the things that you can do within the designer product is parse JSON. And then when you parse the JSON, what we do is we create a tree from that JSON that you can then use within your message flow, within your flow. So here, for example, we've parsed this example JSON, and you can see we have ship order, attributes, order ID, order person. So it all comes through in a way that rather than having to look at it like this, you can look at it within our mapping language. So you get a mappable JSON structure. It's not just a JSON string anymore. It's something that you can effectively drag and drop. You can reference within your flow. Okay, so move forward. We've got the same for XML as well. So not just parsing JSON messages, you can also parse XML messages. So you can have an XML parse node. So here's a bit of XML that we've generated a schema for. Here then is that schema representation. And then that gives you the ability to map pieces together. So you can then map your input XML message to say a Slack message if you wanted to. So you could very easily pull out bits of this data and then Slack them or use whatever connectors we have. And we also have a similar functionality for CSV. So a very similar way of being able to parse that data, put it into our sort of common JSON Arter available language, and being able to play around with that. Okay, so JSON Arter. So this is interesting. So what can we do? We've got these fields all now mapped out, but what can we do? So JSON Arter is a lightweight query transformation language purely based on JSON data. So it's very similar to the XPath of old, where you have like a location path to be able to find parts of the JSON, maybe in an array or whatever. And then we have query expressions. It has built-in operators and functions for adding strings together, mathematical functions, that sort of thing. And you can even create user-defined functions as well. So you can base user-defined functions within this. So this is very, very powerful. So there's a good YouTube video here that's worth watching. And there's also an exerciser, an online exerciser, where you can dump in a piece of JSON and then play with JSON Arter expressions on the right-hand side, and then it gives you the answer from that JSON Arter expression. And every single one of the mapping fields within App Connect, you can use these JSON Arter expressions. So, you know, you can do, you know, this sort of thing, you know, some within an order product array, you can take the price and quantity, multiply them all and add them together. And so the output from that will be just a single value. You can append names and surnames and so on. So it's very, very, very powerful. So why did this come about? You know, why did we create this? So this was Andy Coleman and Matt Bailey originally wrote this. It's now completely open source, so there's a large community around this as well. But we required a graphical data mapper to extract and transform data to and from JSON structures. That's what we required. And there was nothing around really in open source community or anywhere else that really did what we needed. We needed it to run in a browser and run within Node.js, run within the server. We had to use JavaScript because they were there in both places. And there was no standard language to select and manipulate the contents of JSON. JSON has sort of been created a bit like a YAML, well, exactly like YAML is created to just store data really and have data there. There was no real language around that data. So you can use it very simply in the browser there by just using a script source, or you can just npm install it. And it's very, very small, very small. It's a couple of meg, I think, if that. But it allows you to do this sort of thing. So you can have a large JSON model coming in, and you can do things like summing the order, product, price, and quantity, like I mentioned earlier. And so that would go through and take the price and quantities, multiply them all together, add them up, and give you the result that you can see here. So it's very easy to be able to build these up. Yeah, no complexity in the logic at all. It's just can be one big long stream. It all gets unraveled in a like a Lisp type way, and it's you just basically build up the expression to give you that you know, to give you the answer that you want really. So the community at the moment, so there's a large community. We've even got a lot of our competitors using JSON Arter now as well, because it's all completely open source and it's a way of using manipulating JSON. Then there are lots and lots of projects out there, Elastic.io, for example, and other of our competitors using it. But it's built into Node-RED. Node-RED are using it as well. So it's very easy to use this, and there's a large community out there. So if you get any issues with it or any problems, you know, we accept fixes, and there's a community out there to be able to give you lots and lots of examples on how to use it. It's even been ported as well to lots of other languages. So I think the Golang and TypeScript versions are there as well now. So it doesn't just run in JavaScript anymore. So it's also been ported to other languages, and I believe there is a C port as well that's being created too. So it's really taken on a life of its own, really. Right, yeah. So the future of JSON Arter, so growing user base, more and more functions, you know, new syntax in there. I even wrote a function in there as well. I needed to base 64 when I was working on the HTTP connector, the HTTP node. I needed to be able to base 64 the header for that piece of work. So I added in the base 64 function. So that's my small claim to fame for JSON Arter. So I added that in there and got that working. And so it can just grow and grow and grow. It's very, very portable. Okay, right. So what else do we have? So this is something new that's recently gone into Designer. So this is App Connect Mapping Assist. So one of the things we realized was that when you have lots and lots of these flows in your environment running, there's a lot of things that we can deduce from those flows. So say you've got 50 flows running, and a lot of those flows are, say, taking something out of, say, Salesforce, for example. What we can do is we can look at all of those flows and say, right, in 90% of cases, when you were mapping the business phone here to this field over here, you selected the business phone. But in some cases, you selected the mobile phone, and in other cases, you selected other phone. And so what we can do is when you're mapping between the fields within the designer product, we can actually put up with a high probability that, oh, this is what you want to map here. You know, you've got a first name field. You're not going to want to put a phone number in there. You're probably going to want to put a first name in there. Oh, you've got a phone field. You might want to put business phone, mobile phone. And this uses matching semantic rules as well as other mappings that are stored in those flows. So it can see the flows that are running, and it uses that information just in your environment, just in your namespace. It can use that information to give you a probability of a match. And this really does work. I mean, I've used it quite a bit myself, and it gets it right most of the time. Most of the time you find that, you know, if you've got 5,000 or thousands of these lists of things that you can map to, this is really helpful to bring right to the top those ones that it thinks, oh, this is probably what you want to map here. And it gets it, you know, 9 times out of 10, it gets it right. So that's something that's recently gone in the past few months, and is live in our SaaS product at the moment, and is now live in our CPA for I version as well. Right, okay, so that's one there. So flow testing. So this is also something that's gone in relatively recently as well. So this is, I think it's about 6 months old now. It's the ability to be able to test individual pieces. So rather than having to wait and start the whole flow up, what you can do is you can test individual connectors. So for example, here you can check account and connector parameters within, say, this yellow box here. So for this Slack message here, I can hit the test button. I can change and use a different account. I can then edit input parameters using this button here, and then hit a test button. And then you get the test results pop up in this right-hand panel. And it shows you here that, oh, you requested you requested this, you tested this, and what happened here was the response you got back. You know, it posted it, it worked. You know, you got access. And if you go and have a look in your Slack, for example, you know, oh, look, it did. This is some test output. You know, this is some test output did come through. So you can easily see that your accounts are working, that the connector itself is working. Enabling you to get that debug, enabling you to find if there's a problem with your accounts, or there's a problem with the messages that you're sending your third-party systems. And this testing capability works on all of those connectors. You know, even your SOAP, your HTTP, any of your generic connectors that you create, as well as the connectors that we provide within the product. Right, now I did. Let me see. So I did also have another demo here. We're running quite short on time though, but I will. Let me see. I'll run through this very, very quickly. So what I've shown you so far has been relatively simple flows. This is a much more complex flow. So you can see there's zooming in. I know the resolution here isn't great, but it's perfect when you've obviously using it yourself. And that this is showing the sort of a bit more of the conditions and what you can do within the flow. So here you can see we've got a ServiceNow tickets and the start of the flow that's come in. What we're doing is we're checking the language of that ServiceNow ticket, and we're setting a variable. And if the language is not English, we're then using Watson to translate it. So we've now got at this point a English language version of the problem that's been raised. So at that point, we then check the tone. You know, so you can see how this can all build up with if then else is pulling in all the different connectors and endpoints that we provide. here we're going to do a tone analysis. So here we say, right, so this problem that's come in, is the person angry? Is the person happy? What do we need to do here? And then we Slack that out. So we say, right, we've to our service channel, we've got a new incident. The tone is happy, sad, angry, whatever, and here is the problem. And that could be it. That could be the end of the flow. But here we're using a new piece called the situation detector. So this went in again about 6-7 months ago. And if the tone is anger, then we think, oh, right, okay, well, let's check this. So what the situation detector does is it looks through the history of previous messages going through. And what we do is we check at this point, has this caller, has this ServiceNow caller been angry more than once? And if they have, then, well, we should alert somebody else, a manager maybe. Excuse me. All right, so here we detect that. But if they've been angry more than once, then we go through this and we say, look, we need this escalating, and that's what this does here. And this then allows a manager to be able to come in and go, oh yes, somebody needs to look at this straight away and delegate it, or to actually respond themselves. And that's what this notification piece does at the end here. It allows them to literally follow a Slack gets created. They can click on the Slack and it goes into our product and gives them a UI that they can then delegate or respond direct to the customer using ServiceNow. So again, it's very, very briefly, it's showing you how you can build these small building blocks up to a much wider flow. Okay. Right. Okay. So that's most of the designer pieces. So now I'm going to go on to the App Connect Enterprise Toolkit overview. So just go on to that. So I think I've got about 10 minutes left. Right. So for anybody who doesn't know, the App Connect Designer is our on-prem, or traditionally was our on-prem product. Now we have the ability to have the bars running within those integration servers, so within Red Hat OpenShift or within a cloud. So you can create your bar files and you can run them in the cloud alongside all of the designer capability that I've just shown, and have them both talk to each other. And so nothing's changed here really. All the good stuff still there. Our intent is always to make the common tasks easy. Lots and lots of built-in nodes. All the richness that we've had from the past 20 years, we've added to all the time. We use the integration server in our back end for the designer service, for example, or we're using our own integration engine within our integration products. So that's all there. Obviously have the ability to create individual applications, libraries, REST APIs as well, using this. This is the equivalent of the designer flows. Again, much more generic, and you can put a lot more complex logic in here that maybe you can't do. So anything you can't do in the designer flow, or you find maybe doesn't perform, this will be the way that you'll go. So this flow here is quite a nice flow. So it enables you to basically sort of have lots and lots of messages received and processed in an asynchronous way. So you can handle the states and send the replies, and then do what you want to the message here in this transform piece. You can separate out messages. So lots of messages can come in, and then you can process them and order items or do stock requests and so on. So lots of variety that you can do with your message flows and message flow structures. Call out, so the callable flow async. So this is where you can go on different platforms. So for example, you could be running one flow on Windows, one flow on Linux, one flow could be in the cloud somewhere, another flow could be on-prem. And as long as you're running the callable inputs and outputs and replies. They can all communicate with one another. So it doesn't matter what platform you're on, it doesn't matter where you are. Using a callable flow, we can be able to call between our cloud environments and our on-prem environments. Subflows, a way of basically encapsulating a message flow and having it as a reusable piece. So you could reuse that subflow in several places. You can now update that single subflow, and it will also update in any other places that you've got within that bar file as well. You can do that dynamically. So subflows are very, very powerful. Oops. The way that you parse, transform, and route, so you can use JSON Arter as well, but we also have the graphical data as well, the graphical mapper, which allows us to do data mapping too. Lots and lots of pre-built functions. If there's not a function there, again, you can create your own function and call out to it. So it's very extensible. This is the same sort of mapping technology we've had in there for 10 years now, 15 years, and a huge number of maps out there, dealing with huge amount of complexity. This is showing again some more of those more complex, maybe routing pieces that you can do. So you can aggregate, for example, back-end responses. So you could take an input. So this is an input and output from a subflow. You can aggregate lots of messages coming through, and you can wait until you've got 2 back-end messages before a single reply is sent out. So that's something you can do over different threads with inside your integration server. And we now also have the visualized visual flow debugger. So as messages move through your flow, you can stop and pause at any point to see, once you've connected the debugger to your integration server running anywhere, you can see what the message looks like at that particular point, again for debug environments. So that's powerful. We have the ability to be able to patternize, so be able to take a working flow and to be able to then create a pattern from it. So just have a few points of variability that could be used, and to be able to create a bar file with a specific flow. And we have lots and lots of information out there. So this is this is my last slide. So there's lots of courses that we have on developer.ibm.com, and we have the ability to, well, you can go and check these out. So there's lots and lots of these being written all the time. In fact, I just noticed that there was one just before this meeting. I noticed that one has just been published, again using REST APIs with inside the IS Toolkit. So this sort of stuff it's live. We've got a large team constantly developing all of this. We're constantly putting out blogs, information for you. I don't have time to show you this, but I do have a lot of running dashboards and things here on things that I'm working on at the moment. It's all very very exciting. So that felt like I was very, very fast there, Melvin, but I don't know, do we have any questions, or do we have any?
No, there are no questions posted at the moment.
Okay.
So
well, thank you for listening to me, and I hope it's been of use to somebody.
Thank you very much, Dom. If I can ask the participants to click on the feedback form, as you can see, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get together, won't we? Is it Celtic Manor? Hopefully next year, maybe.
One hopes. One can hope.
Yeah,
yes, indeed.
We'll have a drink at the bar.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Superb.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.